Hey, what's up guys? I'm back today with another tutorial. This may not be the tutorial some of you guys were hoping for, but anyways, I wanted to make an updated version of my Cinema 4D tutorial basics video that I made a few months ago. I've had a lot of people complaining, I guess, saying that it wasn't basic enough. So I do want to say one thing first is always try to put out the best quality videos for you guys, and I really take time and put in effort into these videos that I upload. And I can't cover everything. There's a lot of things I would like to talk about, and in the midst of talking about certain things, I forget other things. So I try to cover as much as possible. No matter how much I cover, somebody's always going to have questions about something. So if in this video I don't cover anything or miss something, just leave a comment down below. You don't need to let me know that I didn't cover enough. Just ask your question and I will try to answer it the best that I can. So I'm going to try to make this as basic as possible, and this video is really going to be for the true beginner. So just wanted to get that out of the way. If you already know a little bit about Cinema 4D, this may bore you because this is going to be the absolute bare basics of the program. I'll try to cover as many basic things as I can. And like I said, if I forget anything, just let me know down in the comments below. Ask your question, and I'll try to answer it the best I can. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump up into Cinema 4D R13. So make sure that you are using Cinema 4D R13, the studio version, not the broadcast edition. So anyways, this is the default layout, so anybody who's just starting with Cinema 4D, this is what you are going to see. Alright, so the first thing we're going to talk about here is our timeline. Okay, so our timeline here by default, every time we open up Cinema 4D, is going to be at 90 frames. And you have to think about this at how many frames per second you're playing this at. So right over here to our right, by default, our project settings are going to be right here. And you'll see right here on FPS, this says 30. So that means this is playing back at 30 frames per second. If we press the play button, our animation will play back at 30 frames per second. So in real time, this is going to be 3 seconds long. 90 frames is 3 seconds. So if we were to do 120, that would be 4 seconds, and so forth. So there are going to be instances where you may want an animation longer than 3 seconds long. So to do that, you just input your frames. So I can do 800, as many as you would like, and you're going to type in that value, for example, and press enter. You'll notice this gray bar goes to the left. You'll left click on this gray bar, drag the arrow to the right, and this makes your timeline longer, so you can make longer animations. So if we press the play button now, you can see that the green bar here is going along the timeline. And also, this is to pause. This button here goes to the start of the animation. This button will go to the end. Jump back and forth. This will go frame by frame. And obviously this green button here is play, pause, and so forth. So the very next thing we're going to be talking about is how to move the camera around in here. Right up here in the upper left-hand corner, or upper right-hand corner, excuse me, you're going to see this little I don't know how to explain it. It just looks like a round circle with a dot in the middle. And you're going to left click and hold down and then move your mouse around, and that is how you rotate. So you just hold down on that and then just rotate your mouse around, and that is how you change perspectives in this program. Okay? This button right here, the arrow, this you left click and hold, and this is how you can zoom in. Zoom into anything you're doing. You can also, if you have a scroll wheel, you can also, if you put your mouse right over your perspective view, as you can see right here, you can use that to scroll in and out. And then you also have your move tool, which allows you to move up, down, side to side, and whatnot. Alright, and if you click on this little box, you will see your 4 different perspectives. So you got perspective view, which is 3D view. You have your top view, your front view, and your right view. And like in perspective, in the smaller window, you can still rotate and get different angles and whatnot. If you want to make one of these boxes larger, like fill up the screen here, you just click on this box and it expands it. click back to that, click on that again, and you'll get back to this view. Anytime you want to go to your perspective view, just click on this box again, and there you go. So that's pretty much the basics of that. Now, to create a material, what you need to do, and this is how you add color and textures to objects that you use in your scenes, you're going to double click down here and then double click on the material, and then inside here you have all these options to change. So for example, the color, you can click on that box and then click, it'll bring the color picker box up, and then you can just drag this around and choose any color you would like for whatever you're doing, whatever color you want that to be, and then just press OK, and your material changes. Now you also have settings like luminance, and this is like what will give off light. So if you check on luminance and leave the brightness at 100% and whatnot, then you'll give off light and you'll see that. So I don't really know how else to explain it. It's kind of hard, but we'll get back to that in a minute. You also have reflection. Reflection's used a lot. So if you check on reflection, you'll notice immediately it turns your sphere kind of a silver color. To fix that, you're just going to drop the brightness down a little bit, and now we can see our color. You can pretty much play around with this, but that's how you create a basic material. So our material is down there. So the next thing we're going to be taking a look at is our primitive objects. So primitive are just basically our basic objects in Cinema 4D. So for example, if we hold left click, hold down, and then move our mouse over to any of these objects, we can drop them into our scene. So for example, I'll drop in a cube. So you can see our cube is now in our scene. What we can do with that cube then is take the material we created and drag it straight onto the sphere. And now you can see our cube has a texture applied to it. Alright, and you'll also notice these options here. This is the move tool. So the green axis is your y-axis, so up and down. So if you click and drag, you can drag this up and down. Blue is left to right, so your x-axis, and then red is your z-axis for depth, and you can drag this front to back. And that is how you can move objects around using it that way, or you can just click on the object itself and then drag it around like so. Okay, and the next option we have is the scaling option up here. If we left click, hold down, and then move the mouse side to side, we can scale this object and make it larger or smaller. It doesn't matter. Okay, and the next tool we have is the rotate tool. If we click that, we can rotate objects like so. So we can rotate it side to side, up and down, front to back. Pretty much have full control right here. Alright, and I'm just going to leave it like that. Alright, and okay, so that's the basics of how to move objects around in Cinema 4D. Alright, we're not going to get real advanced here, but the next thing we're going to talk about is rendering. So if you're very new to this, rendering is what you need to do to create your actual animation or your video. So what that means is if this is just a rough, I guess call this a preview, you're kind of like your preview. Cinema 4D doesn't play this what it would look like if the video was actually finished, because it would really be hard on the on your computer and probably wouldn't be able to simulate things that accurately. So basically, to preview render, this will render the active view, so the current frame. If you click that, you'll notice that is a rendered view. Okay, so it doesn't look that good. So what we need to do to make this look better is, number one, we always need to have lighting in our scenes. So what we can do is go up to this light bulb, go to light, and we can drag in a light. And using the same way we move the cube, we can also move the light around as well. And we can just drag this over and then drag it up. And then there you go. We now have light to our scene. Alright, and like with everything you drag and drop, it'll go into this spot over here, and this is your hierarchy. This is where everything that you use in your whole project file, this is where everything's going to be. And by clicking on them, you get options for each one. So if I click on the cube that we've dropped into our scene, you have these attributes you can change and adjust. So it's pretty self-explanatory. I'm not going to go into depth because I don't want to confuse you guys if you guys are really beginners, so we won't cover any of that. But once again, we can click back to the light, and we have all these settings for the light. So for example, I can bring the intensity up, and you can see it changing right there. You can change the type of the light, the shadow. So if you want this light to cast shadows, so for example, if I go up here and drop in a floor like so and press the quick render button, you can see there's no shadowing taking place. So if we click on that light and we go to shadow and go to, for example, shadow map soft, and then we render this, you can see we now have a shadow being casted, which adds a little bit more to the render. It makes it look a little bit better. So that is that. Play around with this. You can change the color of the light if you want. It's up to you guys. So if we do that, we've got more of a purple light. You also have different types of lights you can drop in. You can do an area light. So if we drop that in, go to shadow map soft, get rid of that. Let's just rotate this around. You get a different effect with each light. And if we preview render that, you can see it's a little bit different look. Looks a little bit different from just dragging in a regular light. So that is your lighting. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that for now. Alright, so the next thing we're going to talk about is our render settings, and this is very important. To do that, you're going to click on this icon. Whenever you complete an animation or your image, whatever you get, this is what you're going to change. These are your render settings. So right now in the output, your width and your height, this is going to be how the clarity of your actual animation or your image. So 1280 by 720 is HD, 1920 by 1080 is full HD. So to change that, we can just go to this option and go to film or video, print or portrait, print landscape. That's for if you're doing an image or something. Or we can just go to screen and we can choose one of these presets here, or we can type in our own. So for example purposes, I'll just do 1280 by 720. Now pretend we're doing an animation here and not just an image. We're going to go to frame range and select all frames. Make sure that you don't leave it on current frame, because when you go to render this, you're only going to render out one frame, and if it's an animation, it's going to be more than one frame, so make sure you select all frames. Then we're going to go to save, and this is very important. Depending on what you're doing, you're going to want to change the format to be accustomed to what you're doing. So obviously, if you're rendering out an image one frame, choose like a JPEG, PNG format, or TIFF format. You know, you're not going to want to do a QuickTime movie format for a single image. Now, since I'm going to be showcasing an animation, I'm going to use a QuickTime movie as my format. So this will save as a video. So my format's going to be a QuickTime movie. If you have an AVI codec, then select AVI movie. It doesn't really matter. Either or. And then file. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to click these three dots, and don't know what that is. We're going to go to desktop, and we're just going to name whatever this is going to be. So I'll just name this cube. So the video file, once it's rendered out, will be named cube. And I'm going to save it to my desktop, so I'm just going to hit save. And you'll notice it puts that in there just like that. That shows where the file is going to be saved and what it's going to be named. So cube. Okay, so the next thing we're going to be taking a look at is anti-aliasing. So anti-aliasing, what this does is smooths out edges and reflections on objects. So since I added reflective material on here, you may want to bring this up. So right now, and by default, it's always going to be set to geometry. If we change this to best, we can change the minimum and maximum levels. Now the higher these go, like for example 16 by 16, 4 by 4, that would be, it would take longer to render out, but the lines of reflections and things of that nature would be smoother. It wouldn't look near as jagged, if that makes any sense. So yeah, that's just to get smoother edges and whatnot. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this to geometry right now. And those are your basic render settings. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a simple little animation here. We'll talk about a little bit about dynamics. So I'm going to right click on this cube, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag it up like so. And you may be thinking, okay, the second I press the play button, it should fall. Well, it doesn't. That's because we have to tell it to fall. So to do that, we have to add a dynamic tag. So to do that, let's right click on the cube. And like I said earlier, this is R13. So if you're not in R13, you may not be able to follow along exactly. So I would recommend you are in R13 for this to work the best for you. So we'll right click on the cube, go to simulation tags, and add a rigid body. Okay, a rigid body is automatically going to add dynamics to this cube. So if we press the play button now, the cube will fall, as you can see there. We do have a floor in place, but you do notice that the cube is falling right through the floor. It's not colliding with it. So, like we did with the cube, we have to also tell the floor to be dynamic as well, or else this cube will not detect it when it falls. So right click on the floor, go back to simulation tags, and you can either add a rigid body or collider body. We'll just do rigid body here. Okay, and now if we play this, you can see that the cube actually collides with the floor, and it is dynamic. Alright, now what we can do, if we want to tweak the settings of the dynamics, we can click on the tag itself, and you'll see it'll light up with an orangish yellow box around it. That lets you know that you can tweak the settings. You'll see it down here. It'll say dynamics body tag, and in here we have all the options to change, available to us to change the dynamics of this. So for example, if I go into collision and change the bounce to say 100%. When we play this now, cube is a little bit more bouncy. We can change the friction. So the higher this value, the more friction there is. The smaller the value, the less friction there is. And we'll go to our floor. We'll click on that tag, and we'll bring our bounce up to 110% on the floor. And now this thing should be really bouncy. So you can see there, we get a whole different animation just by modifying some settings within the dynamic tag itself. So you can see it bounces significantly more. Okay, and we also, like I said, we have the friction. So if I turn the friction up to say 80% on the floor and go back to the cube tag, and we'll turn the friction up to 80% and play this, we get a whole different animation. So you can see just by modifying a few values, you can create different simulations. So that would be how you create a basic animation. There are all kinds of other stuff you can mess with here, such as a trigger and whatnot, but this gets a little bit more complicated, and for the basics I don't feel like I need to cover that. So that is that. Now you can always delete a material. Just select the material and press delete, and if you delete it down here and it is applied to an object in your hierarchy, it will also be removed from that object as well. So that is that. Now you can still rotate the camera around and get different views with the same animation. Move it around. Obviously you can delete objects by selecting them and pressing delete. You have your edit, undo button here to undo actions. Let's see here. If you want to create text, for example, because I'm sure a lot of you want to make intros and stuff. We'll go to Mograph, Mo Text, and that will drag in or drop in our text here. And in order to change this to say whatever, we'll highlight it down here, type in tutorial, and our text automatically gets changed to that. We can change the depth, so make the text thicker basically. The subdivisions, we can also change the font right here, so we can change the font to whatever we would like. So I'm going to do that now. We'll change it to this one, for example, so we get a whole different font, right? And once again, this is not dynamic, but we could create a material real quick. Let's just make this red, and we'll add some reflection, drop the brightness a little bit. And we can also add textures, so if we wanted to, if we go to Fresnel, this will make it look a little bit more realistic, I guess. In my opinion, it looks a little bit more realistic. Take that material, we can drag it onto the text in the hierarchy, or we can just drag it straight onto the text in our viewport. If we give a quick render, you can see that's what we have. Once again, we can drop in a light, pull it up, and let's go to change the type of the light to an area light. Go to shadow, shadow map soft, and just give this a quick render preview. So you can see we've got some nice shadowing going on here. In the back, it looks pretty decent. So that's how you set up simple little scenes and whatnot. Alright, to make this look even better, we'll go into our render settings again. We'll go to Effect, we'll add an ambient occlusion. Go to Effect and add in global illumination. Go to the irradiance sketch and the global illumination and change the stochastic samples and the record density to low. And what this is going to do is this will make our render look better. So if we do a render preview again real quick, this should help. It'll take a little bit longer to render, but this should help the image look a little bit better than it did before. So now you can kind of start to see very vaguely some of the reflections on the actual text. So if you want to just render out a specific region, because there may be times when you're rendering something out, it may take a while, you can just hold down right here, left click and hold down, go to render region, and now you have this option to just render out one particular region, and it'll just render out that area on the viewport. So you know that now. Some other things I'd like to talk about. Oh, if you'd like to drop in a sky, you need to go to the floor icon, left click, hold down, go to sky, and this drops in a sky. So if we render out just part of this real quick, you can see now we have a gray sky in the background. We can go down here, create a material, double click on that material like we have before. We'll just make this white, check off specular, and let's just drag this material straight on to the sky itself. We now have a white background. So if we go ahead and do a quick render, you can see we now have a white background and it doesn't fade off to black. The very next thing we could do is we could take this same material and drag it onto the floor here. So now if we give this a quick render, the floor is white as well. So our whole background, our whole image here is completely white. We could duplicate this material to copy material. We can control and drag, and that will duplicate it. We can click on the duplicated material and change values and whatnot. So I'm going to do this with this white material. Control, drag to duplicate it. Let's add some reflection. Bring the brightness down a little bit. Go to Fresnel. Bring the brightness down a little bit. And we'll take this material. We'll delete the one that was on the floor before and add this one to it. And this now we'll have reflections. So if we go ahead and give this a quick render, you may not be able to see it that well. You can see it a little bit starting to show up. So we have some reflection on the floor now. And I don't know if you can see this very well on the video, but I can. Right here, the edges, if you look closely, they're a little jagged and they don't look particularly straight. So to fix that, like I stated earlier, we can go under render settings, go to anti-aliasing, and change that from geometry to best, and bring the minimum and maximum levels up, and that should smooth those edges out. However, this will take a little bit longer time to render. So if we go ahead and do a quick render preview, the edges should be a little bit smoother and should look a little bit better, but as you can see, this is taking a little bit longer to render out. Alright, so you can see there, here on the lines, the edges of the reflection, they look straighter. They don't look as jagged or pixelated or whatever you want to call it, as well as the overall animation. So I just basically wanted to showcase that to you guys so you kind of understood what I was talking about there. You can see the reflection looks a little bit better than it did before, hopefully. Anytime you want to stop a render preview, you just click and it'll cancel it. You can add dynamic tags to anything you drop into your scene. So like right here, I could right click on the mode text, simulation tags, add a rigid body, and boom, it falls. It has dynamic to it. Now one thing we could do, is get rid of that tag, or whoops, let me undo that real quick. Get rid of the tag itself. Right click on mode text, go to simulation tags, and go to collider body. Now what this does is it still gives the text dynamics, but it doesn't fall. It just makes it like a solid object. So other solid objects will interact with it. So if I press play, you'll still see nothing happens. But if I were to drop in a cube, for example, drag it up, we'll just right click on the cube, go to simulation tags, add a rigid body, it will fall and collide with the text. As you can see there, it did not fall through it. Now that probably wasn't the best example, but if we take this collider body tag off the text and leave the rigid body on the cube, you'll see that the cube just falls right through the text and does not interact with it whatsoever. So it's important that you use your dynamic tags if you want collisions and whatnot. Want collisions to happen. So that is that. Once again, just select on the item to delete it, press delete, and there you go. Now here's the next thing. We can drop in cameras by clicking the camera icon. And this little option here, you'll notice when it goes white, that shows you that you're in the active view of the camera. And the reason why we use cameras is so we can add animation. So if I clicked right here to record the position, and we went ahead, say, 100 frames or so, we can go up here and move the camera itself. Make sure the white dot is selected and the camera is selected, and we can just move the camera. And once we move it, we're going to keyframe it. So record the position. So that's very important. If we go back to the beginning and press play, you can see that our camera has some movement to it and it's animated, as you can see there. Okay, and anytime you want to move the move around your viewport but don't want to affect your animation you have, just click off this little camera object so that it dims and it's not white, and that shows you're actually not in the camera's view anymore. You're just in the default viewport. You can actually look at your camera that you placed in your scene that is right there and see the exact track of it. If we press play, you can see the movement of the camera. So this allows you to tweak things and work and not mess up what you already have with your camera path, basically. So if I click this back on, we're back in the looking through the camera's lens that we put into our scene, and there you go. Anytime you do a simulation or something and you make any changes, make sure you start from the first frame to reset it. So always go back to the beginning. That's basically it, guys. We've went into our render settings. Once you're done, what you need to do is go to this button here, just click it, and it'll render the active view. And then what this is going to do is going to go through and start rendering out what you have created, frame by frame by frame. So depending on how fast your computer is and whatever you're doing in your render settings, this could take no time at all, or it could take hours to render something out. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel this and hit yes. If I go to minimize this real quick, you can see this is the file that would be rendered out when it was completed. Remember, we named it cube. Okay, well, this would be the animation. You would this animation right here, that's what this file would be once it got done rendering, and then you could play it and watch it. So that is basically that. I'm trying to think of anything before I forget that I haven't covered yet. If you want to save a project, you go to File, Save As, choose where you want to save it, name it whatever, and hit Save. That'll save your current project. So if we go ahead and quit Cinema 4D, we can just open that project back up, and we will be right where we left off. That's really the bare basics that most people would need to know, honestly. You know, like here, our frames per second is 30. We could change that to 60 frames per second, and you can tell that it plays back a little bit faster. The animation looks a little bit different than if we were to go to like 10 frames per second. You can see it's a lot more choppy. So yeah, that's a way you can adjust your frames per second. Like I said, your render settings. You can drop in any object you want. You can click on these little orange dots here and change the scale, the size of them. We can make it whatever. So yeah, that's really the bare basics, guys. I'm sure there's some things that I forgot, and some of you are probably gonna you know, comment about, but hopefully I got a lot of it and answered a lot of people's questions, especially a lot of beginners. I think that'll do it for now, guys. Like I said, I hope this video was as of help to you, and I think that'll do it. I don't think I'm missing anything. I'm sure there will be by the time this video is uploaded, and it's been up for a while. But for now, I think I covered pretty much the bare basics. This should help a lot of you guys out that had some questions. Hopefully it does. Thanks for watching. If it did help you out, please leave a like and comment with any thoughts you have. If I may have missed anything, like I said before, let me know. And I will see you guys later. So peace out.